What Turkish media is saying right now. She posted a single photo. No caption. No explanation. And within hours, Turkish social media completely lost its mind. That one image started a chain reaction that pulled in millions of followers, triggered a media frenzy across Turkey's biggest entertainment platforms, and forced one of the country's most beloved actresses to finally break her silence on something she had been carefully avoiding for months. This is not just celebrity gossip. This is a story about fame, privacy, public obsession, and what happens when the media decides it owns a piece of your life whether you agree to it or not. And before we're done here, there's one detail that Turkish outlets are reporting right now that almost nobody in the English-speaking world has heard yet. Let's go back to where this all started. Elcin Sangu is not a name most Western audiences immediately recognize, but inside Turkey, she is operating at a level that very few entertainers ever reach. She has been one of the most recognizable faces on Turkish television for over a decade. Her performances have earned her critical praise and a fan base that doesn't just admire her, they feel deeply connected to her. When she speaks, people listen. When she goes quiet, people panic. Baric Arduc is a different kind of figure. He moves through the entertainment world with a certain deliberate energy. A producer and industry insider, he has built a reputation for knowing how things work behind the scenes. He is not someone who chases attention. Attention tends to find him anyway. These two people existing in the same orbit was always going to create a story. The question was never if the media would come calling. The question was always how long they could keep the story on their own terms. For a while, they managed it. Then that photo changed everything. Now here is where the story gets genuinely complicated. Because what Turkish media is currently reporting is not one clean narrative. It is several overlapping stories, each one pulling in a slightly different direction, and, depending on which outlet you follow, you get a completely different version of events. Some of the major Turkish entertainment shows have been framing this as a love story finally going public. The kind of romance that was hiding in plain sight for anyone paying close enough attention. Others are treating it as something more unsettling, a story about two very private people being pushed into the spotlight before they were ready, and the emotional cost that comes with that exposure. And then there is a third group of voices, mostly coming from social media commentators and smaller digital platforms, who are asking an entirely different question. They are not asking whether these two are together. They are asking why the Turkish media machine is so hungry to define this relationship right now, at this specific moment, and who benefits from the timing. That third question is the one that nobody in the mainstream conversation seems willing to sit with for very long. But we are going to sit with it. First, let's establish what we actually know versus what is being treated as known, but is actually still unconfirmed. What is confirmed is that Baric Arduc and Elcin Sangu have appeared together publicly on more than one occasion over the past year. These appearances have been photographed, shared widely, and discussed extensively across Turkish entertainment media. That part is documented and real. What is confirmed is that Elcin Sangu has not issued any official statement about the nature of their relationship. She has posted on social media throughout this period, but with the careful precision of someone who knows exactly which details to share and which ones to protect. What is confirmed is that several major Turkish media outlets, including some of the highest-rated entertainment programs in the country, have dedicated significant coverage to this story over the past several weeks. The coverage has not slowed down. If anything, it has accelerated. What is rumor, fan speculation, or unverified is essentially everything beyond that. The specific nature of the relationship, the timeline, the details being whispered about on fan forums, the alleged insider accounts that certain outlets are citing without naming any source. That material needs to be treated carefully, and we are going to treat it carefully. Because the difference between what is real and what is being constructed matters enormously when we are talking about real human beings. Now let's talk about the atmosphere inside Turkish media right now, because that context changes everything about how you interpret the coverage. Turkish entertainment journalism has always operated with a certain intensity. The culture around celebrity in Turkey is emotionally invested in a way that feels different from the American tabloid machine or the British press. There is genuine affection mixed with genuine possessiveness. Audiences feel a personal relationship with the stars they follow, and that emotional investment creates enormous pressure on the people living inside that spotlight. When a beloved figure like Elcin Sangu goes through something personal, the public does not simply observe from a distance. There is a sense among a significant portion of her fanbase that they are entitled to understand what is happening in her life. Not out of malice, but out of something that feels to them like love, even if from the outside it sometimes looks like something else entirely. Baric Arduc has navigated fame differently. He has maintained a more deliberately private public image, which paradoxically makes the media more interested in him, not less. The less you reveal, the more space exists for speculation to fill. So when these two lives started overlapping in visible ways, the media had exactly the combination it needed. A beloved, emotionally resonant actress with a devoted following. A relatively private industry figure with an air of mystery. Genuine appearances together that confirmed at least some kind of connection. And a significant vacuum of official information that the press was absolutely going to fill one way or another. That vacuum is where things get interesting and, honestly, a little uncomfortable. Some of the reporting coming out of Turkish outlets right now would not meet the standards of what you would call careful journalism. Stories are being built on anonymous tips, on interpretations of social media posts, on reading body language in photographs, and on the kind of circumstantial architecture that feels convincing right up until you realize how many assumptions are stacked inside it. This is not unique to Turkey. It happens across entertainment media globally. But the speed at which these stories circulate within Turkish social media, the way they get amplified and transformed and recirculated, means that by the time a claim has traveled through 3 or 4 rounds of sharing, it has often shed the uncertainty it started with and arrived looking like established fact. For a viewer trying to understand what is actually happening with Baric Arduc and Elcin Sangu right now, that environment makes everything significantly harder to read. Here is what the current media landscape looks like in concrete terms. Turkish gossip and entertainment programs have been running segments on this story with notable regularity. The framing tends to shift based on whatever new piece of content has emerged from either of their social media accounts. A photo gets posted, it gets analyzed, claims get made about what the image does or does not reveal, and then that analysis becomes part of the story itself. It is a feedback loop, and it has been spinning fast. On the fan side, which you cannot separate from the media coverage because fan communities actively drive what gets covered, there are 2 distinct camps that have emerged. One camp is enthusiastic about the idea of these two being in a relationship. They are sharing images, creating content, expressing genuine happiness about what they believe is happening. The other camp is more cautious, more protective of Elcin Sangu specifically, expressing concern about the level of scrutiny being applied to her personal life and pushing back against what they see as invasive coverage. That internal fan debate is itself interesting because it mirrors a larger cultural conversation happening in Turkey right now about where the line is between public interest and private life when it comes to entertainers. It is a conversation that does not have a clean answer, and the discomfort around it is visible if you spend any time reading through the comments sections and forum discussions. Now let's talk about Elcin Sangu's actual career position right now, because this story does not exist in a vacuum separate from her professional life. It is happening alongside a period where her professional standing is significant. She has remained one of the most commercially valuable actresses working in Turkish television. Her projects attract strong viewership. She has successfully made the kind of long-term transition that many actresses struggle with, maintaining relevance and critical respect across multiple phases of her career. That is genuinely difficult to do, and it reflects a level of professionalism and instinct that her industry colleagues openly acknowledge. The timing of this media frenzy, arriving during what is otherwise a professionally stable and successful period for her, adds a particular kind of pressure. When things are going well professionally and the personal life becomes the subject of intense scrutiny, there is a very specific kind of exhaustion that comes with that. People in her position often describe having to maintain perfect public composure during what is privately an overwhelming experience. Whether she is finding this specific media moment overwhelming, manageable, or somewhere in between is not something we can know from the outside. But the conditions for that kind of pressure are clearly present. Baric Arduc's position in all of this is worth examining separately. As someone who operates more behind the scenes, he is experiencing a kind of attention that is different in texture from what Elcin Sangu navigates. She has spent years learning how to exist inside public scrutiny. For him, this level of direct media focus is a different experience, and the adjustment to being the subject of a story rather than someone adjacent to it is not always smooth. What has been notable in recent weeks is what neither of them has said. The silence from both of them, maintained across different platforms and in different contexts, has been consistent and clearly deliberate. Neither of them is feeding the story. Neither of them is denying it in ways that would close it down. The media is working with whatever it can construct from that deliberate silence, and the construction has been running at full speed. That strategic silence is itself a kind of statement if you know how to read it. People who genuinely have nothing to address usually do not maintain such careful, coordinated quiet. People who are protecting something do. What exactly is being protected and why it is being protected right now are the questions that the more thoughtful Turkish media commentators are starting to ask. And then there is the detail that shifted the conversation in the last couple of weeks. Something that several Turkish entertainment journalists have been circling around without quite landing on it directly. The suggestion, and it is still in the territory of suggestion rather than confirmed reporting at this stage, is that there may be professional dimensions to whatever connection exists between Baric Arduc and Elcin Sangu. Not just personal, but professional. Collaboration, projects, a working relationship that intersects with the personal in ways that make the full picture more complex than the simple romantic narrative the entertainment press has been building. If that dimension is accurate, it changes the stakes considerably. Because it would mean that the story the public is being given is incomplete in ways that matter. It would mean that the silence makes even more sense than it already did. And it would mean that when something more official eventually does come, it may look quite different from what the current media narrative is suggesting. This is not the first time Turkish entertainment media has built an elaborate public story around a celebrity relationship only to have the reality turn out to be significantly more layered than the original coverage suggested. The pattern is familiar enough that experienced observers of Turkish celebrity culture have developed a kind of healthy skepticism about the early phases of these narratives. Which is not to say nothing is happening between Baric Arduc and Elcin Sangu. Something is clearly happening. Their connection is real. Their appearances together are documented. The interest from people who know them professionally is real. What is less certain is that the version currently being assembled by Turkish entertainment outlets is the accurate version, or even close to it. That gap between the story being told and the story that is actually true is where the most interesting territory lies. What makes this particular moment in Turkish media so worth paying attention to, even for audiences who have never seen a single Turkish production, is what it reveals about a tension that exists everywhere. The tension between public figures who have built careers that depend on public attention and those same figures trying to maintain basic human privacy around the parts of their lives they have not chosen to make public. Elcin Sangu has never signed a contract that says her personal relationships are public property. Neither has Baric Arduc. But the implicit contract of fame, the one that nobody explicitly agrees to but that the system enforces anyway, creates enormous pressure to give the audience access. And when you refuse to provide that access, the audience and the media that serves it tend to build their own version of what they are not being shown. The version they build is not always wrong. Sometimes it is close. Sometimes it is quite far off. And the subjects of the story have to live with whatever version gets constructed and circulated, regardless of its accuracy. There is something genuinely unfair about that, and the Turkish public conversation around this story has moments where that unfairness becomes visible and people start to push back against it. Those moments of pushback are some of the most honest parts of the whole conversation, and they do not always get the attention they deserve. Right now, as of the current media cycle, the story has not reached any kind of resolution. The coverage continues. The speculation continues. Both Baric Arduc and Elcin Sangu continue to maintain their silence on the specific questions everyone is asking. The fan communities continue to debate. The outlets continue to report whatever new material presents itself. What happens next is genuinely uncertain, which is part of why the story has maintained this level of attention for as long as it has. Uncertainty is what keeps people watching. Certainty would end the conversation. And neither of them has provided certainty. At some point, that will change. Something will become clear, either through an official statement, through a more visible public appearance, through a professional announcement, or simply through the slow accumulation of evidence that eventually makes denial pointless. That moment has not arrived yet. When it does arrive, the narrative that Turkish media has been building will either be confirmed or it will have to be significantly restructured. And the recalibration that happens in that moment, the way the coverage shifts to accommodate whatever the reality turns out to be, will be its own kind of story. What this whole situation ultimately reflects is something worth sitting with. We consume celebrity stories with enormous appetite and relatively little patience for complexity. We want clear narratives, defined characters, simple emotional beats. Love story or not. Together or not. Happy or troubled. The media that serves us knows this and builds its coverage accordingly. But the people inside those stories are not characters in a narrative. They are people managing real lives under conditions of extreme visibility. The gap between how we experience celebrity stories and how celebrities experience being the subject of them is vast, and it rarely gets the acknowledgement it deserves. Elcin Sangu has navigated Turkish media for long enough to know exactly what this moment looks like from the inside. Whether she finds it manageable or maddening or somewhere in the complicated middle is something only she knows. Baric Arduc is learning what it feels like to be the story rather than adjacent to it. That is its own education. What Turkish media is saying right now about these two is a lot. It is saying it loudly, and it is saying it with the kind of confidence that the coverage does not entirely earn. The actual truth of what is happening between them is something that lives outside that noise, in the quiet that both of them have been maintaining with remarkable consistency. That quiet will not last forever. Nothing does. But until it breaks, the story that the media is telling and the story that is actually true will keep existing as two separate things. And the distance between them is where all the most honest questions live. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.